Thanks, Michelle. I will now call the hearing to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. This afternoon, sitting on the panel, we have Ms. Cynthia Stevens on my far left, Mr. Ray Massicott on my direct left. I'll be chairing the hearing. My name is Robert Hutchings. Representing the Assessment and Taxation Department, City of Winnipeg, is Ms. Caldwell, and our executive assistant today is Ms. Neekin. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that the applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by cross-examination by the appellant first and then the panel members, and then the appellant's testimony followed by cross-examination by the assessor first and then the panel members again. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on evidence presented here today. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are recorded and will be part of the public record. And can everybody please put their cell phones on complete silence before we begin? Thanks, Michelle. Could you please swear in both parties? Okay. So we're, number one is back on the docket. Yes.
You state your full name, please. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon, Ms. Caldwell, Mr. Smith. First property in the docket is going to be 47 Scurfield Boulevard, and we're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment. No other issues. Ms. Caldwell, when you're ready, please.
This is file number 19-4906, roll number 0306-516-5500. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $2,594,000. I have a recommendation for this property. I'll just explain it. If you could turn to page 6 and 7, pages 6 and 7. This property has two income streams. On page 6, there's a flex warehouse portion, and on page 7, there's a storage warehouse income stream. The storage warehouse income stream on page 7, you'll see there's two premise IDs. The second one of 1,400 square feet, that no longer exists. So I've removed that. And the 5.5% cap rate, I've increased that to 6.9. So the total overall new assessed value is $2,407,000.
Tricia, could we get the adjusted NOI? Would you have that? And then
Yes.
the new value for that worked up on that stream too?
I can give you the new NOI of the storage warehouse income stream is $9,842.
Thank you.
sorry, and what was the next one?
The capped at 6.9% would equal a new value of
143,000.
143, okay. And your new total value will be,
2,407,000.
yes,
407.
407. Okay. Mr. Smith?
We are in agreement.
Okay, so you accept that, 2,407,000. Okay, and and Cynthia, have any questions of the assessor?
No, thanks.
Ray?
No questions.
Okay, neither do I. Okay, thank you very much. That concludes 47 Scurfield Boulevard. Mr. Smith didn't have a file, okay. Okay, next one on the docket is only Street Boulevard is being withdrawn, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, 875 Bradford Street. And we're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment only. No other issues, so Ms. Caldwell, when you're ready, please.
File number 19-1967, rule number 07002360000. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $1,767,000. This building was built between 1966 and 1968 with wall heights of 11 and 22 feet. It's zoned M2 and has a land plan area of 1.84. Oh, regarding, sorry.
I just noticed it.
The non-cooperation, I'm taking that back.
Okay.
Canceling that, I actually, on the, I included it in here. When this when we received this, it was blank with a note saying it's owner occupied, we don't have any tenants. And at that time, I emailed the business or whoever submitted the IME, and they did give me the expenses. So
Okay, so it's withdrawal.
it's withdrawn.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll carry on from there.
Okay.
All right. Page 3, you can see some exterior photos of the subject property. On page 4, there are some overhead views. Page 5, we have our cap rate chart. 60% of our cap rates fall between 6.34 and 7.8%, with outliers at 5.5% to 9.8%. On page 6, I have the income workup. We have 21,140 square feet at $6.38, 4% vacancy loss, 2% expenses, $3.75 for shortfall, at cap rate at 7%, bringing us to our total value of $1,767,000. And I have some rent comparables on the following page. All comparables are in the subject neighborhood, similar size with low wall heights, with rents ranging from $5.75 to $8 per square foot to support our table rent of $6.38. And with that, we ask the board to confirm our value today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tricia. Trevor, any questions of the assessor?
Just one, really. When I look at the rental comparables, so the range that you have there, that would encompass the rental rate that we've applied to the property as well, I believe, right? That's $6.
Yes.
Okay, that's my only question.
Thank you. Cynthia, any questions of the assessor?
Do you generally know the condition of this at all? Have you been in it or?
I haven't been in for
No.
a few years. So I don't know, I think I was in about 2 to 3 years ago. At that time, it was average for its age.
Okay, it's in the Sargent area, warehouse district area. Okay, no, that's all I have, thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Ray, any questions?
No questions.
Neither do I. Mr. Smith, when you're ready, please.
Okay, so 875 Bradford Street. As noted, it was built in 1964 and 1968. If you look at my page number 1 inside, you can see the breakdown of the age. Now this, I think, is slightly incorrect. It's got 1964 and the size built at 22 feet there, and then 1968, 10,000 square feet at 11 feet. Now, if you look at the very back page of my brief, this is the city of Winnipeg's information with regard to the construction of the building. So we have the 64 portion at 22 feet and 68, 10,000 square feet at 11 feet. However, if you look at the pictures and having been there, I believe the 11 feet refers to the office portion that sticks out. They may have added on to the building at that point as well, but it's not full 10,000 square feet at 11 feet, just to be clear. We're not looking for an 11-foot building here. So as stated, the land to plan area is very low, 1.84 to 1 for an industrial building. That is certainly on the low side. Our description for the property begins on page 2. You can see the basic construction of the property, relatively limited loading. There's one grade level door and 2 dock level doors for the subject property. Now interesting, well, let's go through the photos first. Page number 3, you can see a couple of exteriors. Picture of the dock level loading, which is off of the front laneway. And a couple of shots of the smaller office portion up front, and then the standard warehouse itself. You can see that it's still wood deck, roof, etc. in the information there. Fairly straightforward in terms of the build out. Let's flip to the site itself, page number 8. So the loading for the subject property, if you look at the bottom of that photograph, that is actually a city laneway that runs from Bradford through to the adjacent street, which is Century. The loading is off of that laneway itself. So interestingly, this owner has somehow become responsible for plowing the lane out front. Not officially, but the city never actually plows this access to their site, so they end up doing it themselves. I don't know if it's certainly it's city-owned property, and typically those sections get plowed, but for whatever reason the city is not doing that, and that's held consistent for a number of years. So they have to take care of that front access in order to get reasonable trucking access into the facility. Parking is obviously shown there around the property. It certainly limits the amount of loading that they can put onto this property to essentially those 2 doors, and then I think there's a small grade level one in one part as well. Location is shown on page 9. We're in that interior area between the 2 Route 90 streets heading north and southbound. A lot of older properties here, this being 64 and 68. And we can move on to the valuation itself. We've given you a sampling of the market that we feel is appropriate for the subject. Subject, 21,000 square feet, built in 64 to 68, dominantly 22-foot wall height with some office at 11. And you can see the comparables that we've used. They're as recent as we can, close to the valuation date in 16, 17, and 18 for the most part. similar in size between 16,000, 20,000, 24, couple slightly smaller, and I think one larger. These are well located, generally multi-tenant facilities with good dock level loading at the rear typically, standard parking out front, and you can see our range in rental rates. We have a low of $450, which is the oldest one, $485 for a property on Paramount, 25,000 square feet, $4.85. Built in 1975, so somewhat newer, similar wall height of 20 feet. Pardon me. We have 1073 Keewatin in Inkster Park, considerably smaller, somewhat inferior property, I believe. The Omans, similar in size, 2016 lease for 5 years at 5 1/4. Then we have closer in proximity to the subject, 895 Century, a little larger, 31,000 square feet, $6 a square foot, built in 88, so significantly newer property, and a varied wall height of 15 to 20 feet on that property. Now, this property doesn't front on Century, and indeed your visibility isn't from Century. There's a building that's on Century and one in advance of that as you head north that would somewhat obscure your vision of this, so it doesn't have the same visibility and access as one directly on Route 90 would have. So in looking at our comps, we feel that a $6 a square foot rental rate is appropriate for the subject, given the age, construction, access, the loading capacity, the small site size, etc. On the vacancy end, looking at page number 13, we give you the vacancy stats. This is a single occupant building. You can see the overall industrial average is at the low end at 3%, and then when you look at investment vacancy, it's in that 7 to 8% range. We've applied a vacancy rate of 5% as appropriate for the subject. The expense allowance, we've all heard this text numerous times. I don't think I'm going to tell you anything different today, so I will leave that to the panel's discretion unless you have specific questions regarding the text that I have there. Obviously, we've gone through the exercise of examining the market with regard to non-recoverables, and I believe that we've shown that the overall rate of 7% that was used formerly should still be utilized in the 2020 cycle. I leave that to you to review. Our shortfall allowance is $3.75 a square foot, which is at market, same as the city. And when we look at the subject property with relation to cap rate, we've done two things. We've given you our capitalization rate study in the chart. These were all investment sales where there was a tenant in place and the property was purchased for the net income. You can see that our typical range there is in that 7 to 7.5 range. We have a lower one on Century at 6.6%. That was a multi-tenant, significantly larger building. And then we have a higher one, a little older sale at 8.3%. So subject property built originally in 64 and 68, so it's an older property. We have the mixed wall height there, whether it's 20 or 22. It's in St. James, not on Route 90 with the same access and visibility, but close by. Somewhat challenged truck access, limited storage on site, also impacting the loading capacity for the property. We feel that wouldn't be at the low end of our range in that 7 or sub 7 in some cases. Wouldn't necessarily be at the high end of 7.5 or higher. We're at 7.25% based on our market stats. If you look at Colliers and CBRE, their ranges for investment grade, which this probably would not meet in most investors' eyes, runs from 6 to 6.5 to 7.25, and 6 and 7.25 respectively. Now, that is a narrow slice of the higher end of the market typically. So we have used 7.25%, which gives us our market value of $1,491,000. I believe, yes, that is my presentation. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Tricia, any questions of the appellant?
Just a couple. So this property is situated between Century and Bradford Street with that access lane, city access lane.
Correct.
Does that give them an advantage? Like do they have good access to their building because they're basically right on the street that goes to both thoroughfares?
It's not necessarily an advantage that others wouldn't have on streets that would adjoin Century. I would, certainly the laneway is there. What we're essentially showing is that they have to use the laneway as almost part of their property in order to gain access for big trucks, in order to access their dock level way because of the small site size.
On your page 15, in your cap rate chart, do you know the age of any of these?
I do, and I do have that. If you'll give me a moment, I can dig it out. I hope I brought that today. Just bear with me. They vary, obviously. There's a range of ages in the sales that we have there. It's essentially a broad spectrum of the market. Problem with so many files, so many hearings. I do have that information, and if you can ask me that again on one of our later properties, I will provide that
Sure.
detail, if that suffices.
I guess I'm just curious as to whether or not they're comparable to the subject.
Fair enough, and I'm happy to provide that data when it is in my possession.
I have no further questions.
Thanks, Tricia. Ray, any questions of the appellant?
No questions.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Just on your, although your rent's not hugely different than the city's, just on your rent comps here, how many of those are actually in the same neighborhood as the subject on page 12?
So the Century property would be in
Yep.
close proximity. Obviously Inkster, Key Layton, Paramount, Bentall are in the Inkster Park. Inkster Park area, typically, there's a mix, right? The St. James area tends to have older properties that have lower ceiling heights and draw lower rents, but then Inkster is a superior industrial area, so you get a mix of comparability between the two. Sherwin,
Yeah, so really the
Most
one
of
that's
them
right in
are,
the same neighborhood would be
Inkster.
that one on Century.
the one in the area
Yeah.
would be on
Sure.
Century.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Thank you. Trevor, my only question is this an auto parts warehouse, like a
is.
distributor? Okay.
Yeah, it's, they distribute parts to all the dealerships in the city and repair shops. And
Okay, So, maybe you don't know this, but I guess most of the delivery vehicles would be not semis, but smaller cube trucks.
Well,
and that, or-
the deliveries to the individual dealerships from here certainly would be smaller, but the parts coming in can vary in terms of the size of the truck coming in, right?
Okay, thank you, that's all my questions. Any requirement for summary from either party?
No.
Thank you.
No. Can I request a 2-minute break?
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll recess for 4 minutes, how's that? Okay. Six, 875, yeah. Okay, call the hearing back to order. Next property on the docket is 590 Berry Street. Okay. This is the one you're talking about, right, Trevor, or one of the two?
One of the two.
Okay, thank you. And we're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment appeal only, no other issues. Tricia, when you're ready, please.
File number 19-1974, roll number 07569019300. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $3,804,000. This building has an effective year of 1957, wall heights of 12 and 18 feet. It's zone M1 and has a land plan area of 2.34. The second page, it says no subject property leases. There is a lease in place. I'm not sure if it's arm's length or not. Page 3, you can see some exterior photos of the subject property, and page 4, you can see the overhead view. Let's skip page 5, and I will go to page 6 to the income lookup. You have a total leasable area of 65,964 square feet, with a rent of $4.45, vacancy loss of 4%, 2% expenses, a shortfall rate of $3.75, 7% cap rate, bringing us to our value of $3,804,000. On page 7, I have some rental comparables. These comparables are not all in the subject market region. Because it is a larger building, I had to go outside the area to look. There's not a lot of large size comparables that are not owner occupied. So my comparables have lower wall heights, and the rents range from $4.43 to $6.80. I believe that concludes my evidence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Trevor, any questions of the assessor?
Just one, I guess, regarding the cap rate. So the cap used for this property is 7%,
Correct.
and that's, typically, I think it's stated that it's based on age, size, location, physical structure. So this one was built in 57, has a varying wall height of 12 to 18, wood deck roof, things like that. I just expected that the cap would be a little higher. Do you know what drove that 7 in the model?
Not really. I know, like, effective year, leasable area, and region contribute to the cap rate. Leasable area doesn't look like it applies at all in this case because it's a larger building. So that's all I can say.
Okay.
It is a model cap rate. It is, 7% for a 1957 building.
That's my only question, thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Ray, any questions of the assessor?
No questions.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Just to follow up on that, so would the size of the building in this category have any effect on the cap rate? So if it's a large like this, would that make the cap rate go up slightly generally in your?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's all I had, thanks.
Thank you, and I have no questions. Mr. Smith, when you're ready, please.
Okay, so subject property 590 Berry Street. It we have some detail with regard to subject property beginning on page number 1. As stated, we have an original construction date of 1956. I'm not sure what the 2001 addition would have been, but certainly I think the vast majority of the structure was built in that 56, 57 time frame. We have a front office portion which would be at 12-foot height. It's stating, or the city's information is stating exterior wall height of 18 feet. We look at it on site, it appears to be lower than that. When you're inside, the clear height is certainly relatively low, so it's not a warehouse that one would stack a lot of product in. It being built in that time frame, it is an older structure. You do have wood deck roof and the other components of that vintage as well in terms of the structure. So you have obviously ongoing capital requirements to maintain a structure such as that. They do age and depreciate, and money does have to be invested into them. Now, this property is tenanted with the same tenant that is in the 580 Berry, which we'll deal with later. I'm just guessing here, but I think that 2001 age date might be the adjoining building section that they built to adjoin 590 to 580 Berry. I don't have that factual detail behind it, but I believe that that's probably what we're looking at. So because the tenant was going to occupy both buildings and they're owned by the same owner, they built an adjoining tunnel as such, and an addition between the two buildings. And if you look at the bottom of page 5, you can see that section that they're able to move product back and forth between. Now, given the age of the building and the layout, the adjoining, in fact, they needed to adjoin it to the other to have the full size. It's not an ideal setup in terms of production of their product. It does have an impact on the efficiency of the creation of their product that they make there, which is their environmental controls is what they create on site. So an electronics, HVAC type of product. The site itself is shown on page number 6. You can see the building outlined, or the property outlined in red. It's somewhat unusual in shape in that there's another property at the rear of the site on a small little triangular piece that is not owned by the same owners. If you look at the bottom of my site aerial, you can see the adjoining section of building that attaches it to 580 Berry to the south. Now, the site itself overall, if you look at the building, in comparison to the site, we have a 2.35 to 1 land to plan area ratio. They have very limited parking on site for their tenant. and any customers that come. The loading has to be done from the rear of the property. As you can see, it's at the back end. So those do have impacts as well. Location is shown on page number 7. It's in that older St. James industrial area where typically the buildings are of that 50s, 60s vintage with lower ceiling heights, etc. So in lesser demand in that area. So let's move on. We have, to the valuation section, we have a lease in place as of September 2016 at a rate of $4.50 a square foot for 5-year term. Our information is that it is arm's length. Looking at the market, we've given you a number of properties on the following page, as recent as we can in terms of the lease date, and in terms of size and utility in comparison to the subject. Now, you can see that our sizes range between 7 and 24,000. We didn't have any of this size that would be directly comparable to the subject, but you can see that generally these are also more recent buildings. Typically they have higher ceiling heights than the subject property as well, so they do have superior aspects to them, and indeed a number of them would be considered as superior to the subject. So what we're showing essentially is that the market rent or the lease that's in place is at market, so we believe that the $4.50 is appropriate, so we have used that in our analysis. Vacancy that we've applied, again, we have the same vacancy study. We have a longer term lease here struck in 2016 for 5 years. They're using 2 adjoining buildings. We've used a 4% vacancy in our analysis. Our expense allowances are the same, as well as the shortfall. The capitalization rate study that we've presented already is the same. The subject property, as we've discussed, is an older property. It has functional obsolescence in terms of the build-out of the structure, age of it. There is, and I don't know that I mentioned this, for most users, there's kind of an overabundance of office space. I'll get you to look at the site picture on page number 6. So if you look at the right-hand side of that photo, you can see kind of a section of the building that fronts on Berry. That's all office space. It's essentially overbuilt for the size of the building. For most users, they would not have a use for that degree of office space, so that limits the attraction to the property as well in terms of tenants or investors finding tenants that would have a need for that. Relatively low exterior wall height again. I'm not sure that it's fully 18, and we have that low office area at 12. Low land to plan area ratio. All in all, it's going to get a higher cap rate than a typical investment grade property. We had used an 8% capitalization rate in our valuation here. I'm going to make a slight adjustment just in looking at the potential that the ceiling height is that little bit higher than what we're saying at 16 feet. I would use a 7.75% cap rate. And if we do that, that would adjust our market value to $3,236,000. And if you move back to my page number 1, you can see that this is an increase over the revised 2018 assessed value as well, and reflects the market level of rent that they're achieving on site as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Tricia, any questions of the appellant?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Just, so the two buildings, I know we're gonna hear the other one shortly. Could they be sold independently? Or are they so,
They're on separate titles.
yeah,
Theoretically, they could be sold separately. If you look at that site aerial again, which shows you the bounds of the site, I mean, you could, I suppose you could do one of two things. The site appears to cut the addition joining the two of them not in half, but it's not flat against one building. So you could either rejig, I don't know how one would go about that, but rejig the actual lot lines to have it fall on one side or the other, or you could demo the section in between if you had either the tenant retract and only need one building and not the other. I suppose it's possible.
is the parking area, et cetera, contiguous? Like, so it's not, so can you drive from one property through to the other one on the parking area there?
At the rear of the site, you would be able to access the
Okay.
back of 590 Harry. It's more restricted than this one in terms of parking.
Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Ray, any questions?
Just, yes, regarding the cap rate, you decided on 7.75%. Can you just expand on it? Why did you arrive at that particular cap rate?
Well, I was looking at the building in terms of everything, obviously, but we have an older structure. We have overbuilt office. I was thinking and I don't have the hard figures on this. The city has a wall height of 18 feet. We believe it to be somewhat lower than that, but I don't have the backup on that. I felt that looking at the loading on the rear of this particular site, it has a bit better loading than anticipated for a site that has the low land to plan area ratio of 2.34 to 1, because you can access it from the rear lane or the rear street, whichever that is. Typically, given a low ceiling height, older building with a low land to plan area ratio in this area, I would certainly be at 8, but I thought it warranted a slight adjustment based on those factors.
That's all my questions.
Thanks, Ray. Trevor, let's see. We've got a slight difference in square footage, 854 square feet difference
Right.
between your building size and the assessor. Any comment on that?
The lease is at the 64,840, so they would have,
Okay.
I'm sure they would have measured it at the time, so.
Okay, thank you. And second question, what the heck is that on the roof of this building?
Which photo do I have that in? It's like an no, it's not an atrium, but it's like a greenhouse essentially.
Okay, that's what it looks like,
Yeah.
yeah.
That they actually utilize for their, maybe that's the difference in square footage, I'm not sure. But they use it for the purposes of what they produce in some
Oh, okay,
some
okay.
fashion. They don't grow plants there. but
Testing or something?
to do with that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Any requirement for summary,
No.
either party? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So that concludes 590 Berry. Next up in the docket is 791 Bradford Street.
Trevor, did you want to hear 590 and 580 together?
That's, I did mention that. It's
Yeah, I think we'll remember.
You'll remember?
Or on top of it. Yeah.
So our next one is
791 Bradford Street.
Sure.
Yeah, we all have the rec, right? Yeah.
Happened yesterday. Good deed. Okay, 791 Bradford is a 2020 realty appeal, no other issues. And let's see, we've got a recommendation, I guess, by Ms. Caldwell.
Yeah.
If you'd like to go through that, please.
Sure. File number 19-1568, roll number 0700-196-5500. The 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $1,174,000. And I have a recommendation to reduce the value to $871,000. That is by reducing the rent from $8.21 to $6.13.
Okay, so plus the rent. Any other changes?
No.
That's it? Okay. And we go from 1,174,000 to 871,000. Mr. Smith, have you had a chance to review this and any comments?
I'm just, if I could just look at it.
Of course, yeah, go ahead. Okay, this will cut out at 6:31. In the meantime, Tricia, would you have the revised NOI?
I didn't work that out,
Okay.
but
Just-
I can. Mr. Chair. It is 55,733.
733, okay, thank you. Trevor, have you had a chance?
I have, and yes, I can be in agreement with the revised market value, certainly. Don't get the idea that we're approving of 6.4%, et cetera, but.
Okay,
my
final value.
Final value, yes.
Okay.
They've invested, they've had to repair the roof and they put some money into the office portion, et cetera. So in my mind, that in this case does make sense.
Okay.
My only comment is we're looking at a 57 building of 11 to 17 wall height here again. In looking at the components that, but yes, we're in agreement with the value, yeah.
Thank you. Cynthia, any questions? of
No, no questions.
Assessor? Ray?
No questions.
Good, okay, and I'm good too. Okay, thank you. And Michelle, you got that? Okay. That concludes 791 Bradford Street. Okay. Next property on the docket is 1457 Chevrolet Boulevard. And we are dealing with a 2020 realty appeal. No other issues. Ms. Caldwell, when you're ready, please.
File number 19-1519, roll number 0306625200. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $3,605,000. This is a multi-tenant storage warehouse building with 2 income streams. We have an effective year of 1973, wall heights 10 to 23 feet, zoned M2 with a land to plan area of 3.78. On page 2, you can see the subject leases in place. And page 3, you can see some exterior views of the subject property. The top 3 photos are the storage warehouse component, and the bottom photo is a daycare. It's essentially like office space. And on page 4, you can see some overhead views with both buildings. And I will skip past page 5 and go to page 6. To the office income stream, where there's a leasable area of 10,000 square feet with a rent of $13.47, vacancy loss of 5.5%, 2% expenses, $7 shortfall rate, a cap rate of 6.7%, bringing that total to $1,804,000. And on page 7, we have the income workup for the storage warehouse portion. There's a total leasable area of 21,724 square feet, and there's an overall rate of $6.61. Vacancy loss of 2.5%. Expenses at 2%, $3.75 shortfall rate, a cap rate at 7.5%. Which brings our value to $1,801,000. And on page 8, we have the income summary, which adds the 2 incomes together. You can see the summary on the left-hand column. We have our estimated market value of the 2 income streams, at $3,605,000. The combined overall rent of the 2 income streams is $8.77. On page 9, I have some rent comparables. All comparables are in the subject neighborhood, market region, similar vintage for the most part, with rents ranging from $5.16 to $10.50 per square foot. And thank you, Mr. Chair, that's my evidence.
Thank you, Tricia. Trevor, any questions of the assessor?
Just a very few here. So I see that there's different capitalization rates applied to the two different streams, one for office and one for industrial.
Correct.
Okay, but, so the property is on a single title and a single roll number, et cetera, right?
Yes, yes.
So it would transact as one whole?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Just two quick questions on the lease comps on page 9. So the very first one, 1100 Waverly Street, this is that former, pardon me, the former Manitoba Hydro complex. They had, I think, 3 or 4 kind of flex type buildings fronting on Waverly.
Yes.
It's the Fort Garry Business Center.
Correct.
Okay. In there would be tenants such as Strive Fitness, a CrossFit Place, Lasertopia, a Chinese food restaurant, things of that nature?
Yes.
Okay. And just my last question, the very last comp there, 80 Fennel Street. That is a Montessori school, correct, in that portion of the building?
Yes.
Okay, so that will be very comparable to the office use here as a daycare, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Those are my only questions.
Thank you, Trevor. Ray, any questions of the assessor?
No questions.
Thank you. Cynthia?
I'm assuming this is all model, but I'm just, on page 7 for the storage warehouse, the 7.5% cap is I think the highest one we've seen on warehouse portion from the city today. So I'm just wondering, any sense of why that would be when it's got an effective year built of 73?
And why the previous one at 57?
Yeah,
No,
no,
why
okay.
yeah, I'm sorry, I wish I could.
Okay, that's all I had, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Tricia, page 2, I get an average from the leases in place of just under $8 a square foot. Is that what you thought?
Yes.
Okay. And the model's using 877 for, I think you said 877 for
877.
both income streams. Okay.
Yeah.
Different usage. Okay. That's my only question. Thank you. Trevor, when you're ready, please.
Sure, so just in relation to that, and looking at, and I didn't go through them in detail, but we have some superior properties here in relation to the subject, which would skew that average higher if you're looking at an average in relation to what's been applied by the city. So just my comment there. So with regard to 1457 Chevrier Boulevard, it is partly owner occupied. Grandma Marie's is the owner of the Grandma Marie's daycare is the owner of the property. And their lease in place is not arm's length, obviously, between her entity and her ownership entity and her business, Grandma Marie's. So that's a bit of background on that section. Looking at the property itself, again, older property built in 63 and 66 in terms of the majority of the property being that warehouse. 21,724 square feet. The Grandma Marie's building is 10,000 square feet, built in 1990. The warehouse wall height is 18 feet. And we have a land to plan area ratio of 3.98 to 1. Now, if we look at the photos, you can see the lower section of the warehouse, which is an office component on that front side there. The exterior showing you the cladding and some of the age of the building, obviously, on the loading area at the top of page 3, as well as the yard site. Interiors of the office area, obviously somewhat dated. You can see the interior of the structure itself, the age of the roof, the general nature of the building as you go through. So obviously the building is not newer and does show you the evidence of its age. It would be somewhat typical of a property of that age, I would say. The Grandma Marie's building is shown on page number 7. And you're looking at the entryway as well as one of the main areas at the bottom of page 7 there and onto page 8. So that's obviously the office component. They are on a non-arm's length lease of $13.50. It's our contention that is above market. Obviously it's non-arm's length, so we're not relying upon it, but we feel that $13.50 is certainly above what would be achieved on the market. So let's look at valuation section beginning on page 13. We have the actual leases and lease rates as shown on page number 13. You have 6 1/4 rent, $6.35, and a lease from 2013 at $5.50. Now I will point out that when you are acquiring investment properties on the marketplace and they're multi-tenant, you are going to have a range of lease start dates. So you're not going to have all new leases as of 2017 or 18 with brand new leases at the peak of the market, etc. You're going to have that range. So yes, over time things will adjust, and that tenant may renew or they may leave and you'll get a different tenant in, etc. But as of the valuation date, this is what the property is achieving so to project if they are at market rate, which remains to be shown. If they're at market rate, having a higher rate is simply attributing rent to the property that they are not achieving. So bit of background there. Obviously the non-arm's length lease at the bottom of the page at $13.50. Let's move on to our industrial comps. So looking at wall height and age, utility size, obviously we have a 3-tenant building, tenants in the range of 3,000 to 10,000 square feet. In terms of the breakout of the building, so our areas, as you can see, we have some smaller ones. We have some around 10,000, 9,000, 8,000. So we're attempting to show as best we can what the market for that is. Ages, generally newer than the subject, that portion of it being built in the 63, 66 time frame. With the majority of ours being in the 79 onwards. Ceiling heights, 17, 18, and 20 dominantly, 19, 20. And generally newer rental rates, as you can see. So we see a concentration of rates in that, in and around that $6 a square foot rental rate range, $6.25, $6.50. I'm happy to answer questions about any of these. These are well located in prime industrial areas. So we feel that given the age, location, ceiling height, loading, etc., $6 a square foot is appropriate for the warehouse component of the property. Looking at the office side, well, is it office? It's a daycare center, it's wide open, it's more akin to a school or something of that nature, but it's classified as office. So let's see if the $13.50 bears out, and I'm not sure what the rental rate the city assigned to it was. Just go back, $13.50, almost bang on, $13.47. So we have suburban office rental rates here. These are leases that are in place as of those dates with the terms as shown. So 865 Waverly. We have a rental rate at $12 a square foot for 10,000 square feet. Property built in 2000, certainly superior to the subject. A little older lease of 2013, but as of the valuation date, that was the rental rate that they were achieving. Wellington in the St. James area, 11,500, 1065, older building, newer lease at 2017. Century Street, well located, 2016 lease at 1250 for 9649 square feet. Portage Avenue, well located, 2015 lease at $12 a square foot, 1978. These are, office is driven by somewhat different things than industrial. Ease of access, visibility can have an impact, obviously parking, things of that nature. So it's a bit of an odd duck what we're looking at here in comparison to the market. I would, not having had it myself, I would point to the city's lease of the Montessori property, 80 Fennel Street. It's not a Montessori property, Montessori is a tenant. So a school use very similar to the subject. 2016 lease at $10.50 a square foot in the immediate area for us, well, 4,300 square feet. Market stats give you, page 15 gives you an indication of Class C suburban office. This, again, really not exactly Class C suburban office, but we have an average of $11.61 a square foot. As shown by our firm, Cushman & Wakefield. They do a detailed study of the office market every year by twice a year. So you can see Class C is showing as 1161 as the average. We also have two daycares at the top of page 15, one at $10.85 a square foot. 1775 gross in the second part of that tenancy, which years 6 to 10, starting in 2011. Originally starting in 2011, so 6 years down the line, 2017, their net equivalent was 1085. The one below that, net equivalent, closer proximity on Victor Lewis Drive, so in that southwest area of Waverly, $8.67 a square foot. We've used $12. I think that's certainly at the upper end of where I would peg it. The vacancy stats, we've shown you both industrial as well as office on page 16. You're welcome to go through them there. Class C suburban office is showing 8 to 16%. We've used 7% in our analysis. The industrial vacancy, same stats as before. We're at 4% for the subject property. Let's move forward. We've assigned the same shortfall rates as the city, and in keeping with standard appraisal practice, the separate income streams would not be capitalized differently. You're buying the property as a whole. It's on a single title, single roll. They're not separate. They may be different uses, but they would not be capitalized differently. You would capitalize the property as a whole. So we have used the 7.5% capitalization rate, which gives us our value for the office of $1,319,000 and the warehouse of $1,663,000. Combined, they come to $2,982,000, and that's shown at the bottom of page number 19 there. And that is my presentation. I can answer questions on the caps if you have any questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Tricia, any questions on the appellant?
Page 14, your industrial rent comparables. You have no comparables in the subject neighborhood?
We didn't have any of the appropriate size that we had access to in the immediate area.
Okay. And then on page 15, you have two, I guess, daycare comparables. Colony Street, would you say that's comparable?
No.
Neighborhood?
No, I wouldn't say it's a comparable neighborhood, really. It is in an office building adjacent to the downtown, so there's reasonable demand for it, but it's not the same type of neighborhood necessarily, no. One is industrial, one is adjacent to downtown, so they have different factors.
And the second one, index 2, that tenancy ended in 2011.
I don't have the rental rate, the rent chart for that building here today, so I don't have.
That was the previous Grandma Marie's, and then they moved to their current location.
I'm afraid I don't have that information here today. If you have that, I certainly believe you.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Cynthia?
No questions.
Oh, may I? I have one more question.
Sure.
Did you have a chance to look at the actual NOI from their expense?
I didn't in detail review what they had arrived at in terms of what they pictured as their NOI, but I did review, obviously, their net rental rates and appropriate market stats.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And my only question, Trevor, is would you mind confirming your total NOI for both income streams is $223,593?
So I'll just add them up here. I have 223,593.
Yeah, and capped at 7.5. I think you got a little bit of a reduction coming there on your, when you do it that way.
I did cap it at 7.5, yeah. Let me
Yeah.
just,
So I think it's 2,981,000 rounded downwards.
oh, yes.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
Yeah, when you do it. You got it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, together that way it would come down.
Okay. All right, that's my only question. Any requirement for summary by either party? Okay, that concludes 1457 Chevrolet Boulevard, and we're gonna take a 10-minute recess. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Michelle. I will now call the hearing back to order. And next property in the docket is 2081 Logan Avenue. And we're dealing with the 2020 Realty Assessment Appeal only, no other issues. Tricia, when you're ready, please.
File number 19-1970, roll number 07092565000. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $2,462,000. And I have a recommendation for this property to reduce the value to $2,207,000. This is based on a reduced rent to $7.84. And the adjusted NOI is $154,517.
164?
154.
154. Thank you. I'm sorry, what was the last meeting?
517.
517, thanks. comments? You need a minute to review it, or?
So, I am accepting of the rental rate, and I will leave it up to the panel with regard to the 5%, which is our only other discrepancy. But I can agree to the 784 certainly as far as right. I know it's an overall rec, but. And then we don't need to cover all of the discussion, because it's simply one item, and we've heard all of that.
Yeah, okay. So you're not accepting the 2,207,000?
Not specifically because it excludes our,
Yeah. So are you gonna present quickly?
I don't know that I need to, do I? We've covered it, I can, but
Well, maybe give us, if you wanna do a quick, so you're not accepting the amount, so we're gonna have,
I very much appreciate the city having a second look at it, and I believe that the rent is probably a fair rent.
yeah,
Our only contention, as it always is with these, is with regard to the exclusion of the 5% non-recoverable. If you refer to my brief, the material is there that covers this adequately with regard for the need for inclusion of that. I'm not going to go through the details. I know that each of the panel members has heard extensively from us on it. I believe the information is there to support the inclusion. But again, we do recognize and thank the city for the adjustment on the rent.
You didn't happen to work that out, did you? That 784 and the
Oh,
5%?
I didn't, but I can,
Yeah, that would be helpful.
certainly.
yes, please.
And essentially, we're agreeing on the cap rate, we both have 7%, so yeah, we just dispute the difference of the 5%, 7% versus 2%.
So I come to an NOI of 146,490, capped at 7%, gives you 2,093,000. The only other thing I would point out is the discrepancy in size with regard to the subject. I know that it says leasable area on my page 1 of 21624. That is incorrect. The lease is structured based on 21216, and the tenant has been in place for quite some time, so that measuring will have been done. There's a 2-level office at the front. I don't know if it's basement that they're taking into account or quite what that is, but the lease is the 21216.
Okay. So I'm gonna review what we've got in place now, okay, so Mr. Smith's sitting at an NOI of 146,490, right, Trevor?
That's correct.
And the assessor is sitting at 154,517. You're both capping at 7%. Mr. Smith is, I think, agreeing with that rental rate, and then the difference is the 5% expense allowance. So that means Mr. Smith's new calculation is 2,093,000, and the assessor sitting at $2,207,000.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Do you have any questions? All right, no more
No.
questions?
panel members?
No questions.
Okay, all right, so that concludes, let's see, 2081 Logan Avenue. All right, thank you. All right, next property in the docket is the sister property here, okay, 580 Berry Street. And we're dealing with a 2020 Realty Appeal. And no other issues. So, Ms. Caldwell, when you're ready, please.
File number 19-1973, roll number 075601699900. For 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $1,312,000. This was built in 1957, 12-foot wall height. It's zoned M1 and has a land plan area of 2.42. Page 3, you can see some exterior photos. And on page 4 is an overhead view. And go to page 6, the income workup. There's a total leasable area of 20,000 square feet at a rent of $5.04, 4% vacancy, 2% expenses, $3.75 shortfall rate, cap rate of 7%, bringing us to our value of $1,312,000. And I have some rental comparables on page 7. All comparables are in the subject neighborhood with lower wall heights and similar vintage with rents from $4.20 to $8.84. And that concludes my evidence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. Mr. Smith, any questions of the assessor?
Just very few. The ceiling height, external wall height, that would typically have an impact on rental rate, correct?
Yes.
Looking at the rent comps on page 7, I see quite a few of them are on Route 90, so either Century or King Edward. These would have greater visibility and draw essentially for tenants that needed visibility in comparison to the subject. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Cynthia, any questions?
Just on, I just went back and checked, so the rental, I know this was model driven, so the rental rate for the previous building that was the sister building to this was lower than this. Are they different sizes?
The other
Yeah.
one was quite a bit
Larger, okay, yeah,
I think
that's
it was
what
about
the- yeah.
65,000 square feet.
I should have looked at that when I looked at the print. Okay, so that's all I had then, thank you.
Thank you. Ray, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. And, I have no questions for the assessor. Mr. Smith, when you're ready, please.
Okay, thank you. So 580 Berry, again, we're in that older section of the St. James industrial area to the west of Route 90. If you look at my page number 5, you can see the location of the subject. So your Route 90, either King Edward or Century. You can see to the east of this is west of that. This is one of the older industrial sections of the city, and your buildings are typically in that 50s vintage and lower ceiling. There is much less demand for these. We either have a 12 or a 14-foot exterior wall height on this building. That's at the very low end of the scale in terms of industrial. may see some smaller buildings that might have a 10-foot or 11-foot height, but typically 12-foot is bare bones in terms of the bottom end of the ceiling height, external wall height. Indeed, it's not ceiling height because your internal clear height is going to be considerably lower than that. So what this means just generally is that your stacking height is significantly impacted. Really, you don't have a stacking height, but you only have a 12-foot ceiling height. So there's a significant impact on the draw for this type of building in terms of tenancies. You have to have the right kind of tenant that can use it, and there's a lot less of them out there. Typically, industrial users need higher ceiling heights in order to store product or indeed conduct their business. So let's look at the photos. First of all, my page number 1 gives you some background on the property. 20,000 square feet, 2.4 to 1 land to plan area ratio, very low, very limited loading on the subject. Our 2018 assessment was reduced at the Board of Revision, which we have appealed to the municipal board, as you can see on page 20, or rather page number 1 there. Obviously our value is lower, and it was lower again for the 2018 cycle. 2016, you can see the reduction achieved there as well. So let's look at the building. Page number 2, you can see an external shot as well as internal. You can see the ceiling height that we have. It is very low. Again, you're looking at a wood deck ceiling, older structure. The loading for the property is located at the rear of the property. This property itself, and keep in mind, we're only valuing this property, not the adjacent one, and who owns which. It's what's the value of this property on the market on a standalone basis. So it doesn't matter that you can access it from the adjacent property because the ownership is the same. It's what is the value of this on the market. If they didn't own that, you don't have the access from that site. And we're not valuing business interests, we're valuing the realty itself. So your access to the rear is from the Berry Street frontage through all of the parking for the building around to the back. And as you can see, you can't get full-size trucks in there. It's limited to the smaller ones. Now, a user of a building of this size is probably typically going to have smaller trucks as well, but you are limited to that type of user and that type of loading. So again, very low limited land to plan area ratio in that 2.4 range, no on-site storage essentially. So let's look at the value for the subject. The rent in place is at $4.73 a square foot for 20,000 feet, struck in 2016, so quite a recent lease as well. And you can see our comparables on page number 9, and we're looking for similar size, similar utility. It's going to be difficult to find a 20,000 square foot lease of 12 to 14 feet in the market. So we have somewhat superior properties here. Typically, Bentall, older lease in 2013, 15,000 square feet, built in 87, 20-foot wall height at $490. Paramount is a multi-tenant property, large investment grade property, 2018 lease, 24,000 square feet, built in 75, 20-foot wall height, $4.85 a square foot. 1073 Key Layton, certainly better access on Key Layton. 7,000+ square feet at $5 a square foot, 79 building, 19-foot wall height. You get the general idea. This is towards the bottom end of the rental rate scale for superior properties of a similar size. So the subject's lease of $473 we think is certainly at the upper end of what we would see for it on the market. The tenant being in the adjacent building and needing additional space took over this one. They're motivated, one could say, by the need to not move and disrupt their business interests. So with the adjoining building being available to them, it made sense for them to stay in place. So one can view their rental rate as being somewhat motivated as well. I'm not saying anything new here. This is well-known information that tenants that are in place do have a certain motivation to stay in place in many cases. The remainder of the brief, I'll run through it relatively quickly. Our comments, or rather our parameters, are the same right down until cap rate. I've discussed this already in relation to the adjacent property, which I made a slight adjustment to, given some of the factors that we have there. We don't have those factors on this site. The loading is what it is. You don't have, given if you didn't have common ownership between sites, which is again not what we're valuing the realty. The access to the rear loading is through the side parking, and you're limited to small trucks. Really no storage on site, low ceiling height. Very old property, which obviously there will be more capital needed to be expended on it over near term than a newer property. At a minimum, you would be at a cap rate of 8%, and I feel that's being generous at 8%. It could be higher. Demand for these type of properties is significantly lower on the marketplace, so I see nothing less than an 8% being appropriate for the subject. So this is summarized at the bottom of page 7 and gives us our market value of $1,017,000.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Tricia, any questions of the assessor?
On the assessor now. Nice. So I get that pension too. Sorry.
What happened? Sorry.
She said, Tricia, any questions of the assessor?
Oh, okay. Helen, pardon me.
The assessor has no questions.
Thank you. Cynthia,
I have no questions.
thank you. Ray?
No questions.
And neither do I. Okay. So that concludes 580 Berry Street. At least you're paying attention to me. Okay, next property is 1575 Seal Avenue, and we're dealing with a 2020 realty appeal, realty assessment appeal only. No other issues. Ms. Caldwell, when you're ready, please.
File number 19-519, roll number 0307-1512-000. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $3,064,000. I have a recommendation for this property. If I could get you to turn to page 6 to the income workup. There are 3 premises. The third one, 13,568 square feet, is mezz space that no longer exists. So I'm removing that for a leasable area of 45,158 square feet. And I'm applying a rent of $4.31.
To the entire remaining?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that gives NOI of $180,617. And the revised value is $2,408,000.
Thank you, Tricia. Trevor, opportunity to review.
again, I very much appreciate the city having had the chance to chat and looking at the building again and removing the space that doesn't exist. I have to discuss one particular thing, that's all. So I'll have to proceed.
Okay.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate the second look, and we're getting very close at this point.
Yeah, okay. So you're not in full agreement with the 2,480,000?
Very close, and
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't mean to quibble, I just
No,
need
no.
to point one thing out.
Of course. Okay, anything else you'd like to add, Tricia? You kind of reviewed what you did there and...
No, I don't think so. I think, as far as my comparables, this is the lowest, much lower than any of the comparables that I could find, so,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so I'm sticking with the, adjusted square foot at $4.31, and
Okay,
7.5% cap rate.
all right. Trevor, do you have any questions, or you just leave it
I
for
have
your
no questions.
presentation? Okay. Cynthia, any questions to be
No
assessed?
questions, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, great.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Trevor, when you're ready, please.
So I'm not going to run through my presentation here. All I
Thank you.
mean to point out is, so we, having gone through it as we did, you can see our work up there, we came to a value of $2,297,000. Subsequent to that, and I didn't have this information prior to doing that, we saw the sale information submitted to the city, so the property sold in 2017. And it states that great, and again, it's entirely up to the panel what you decide to do, obviously, but the sales verification form states an amount of $2,060,000 plus roof repair of $200,640. So if they're essentially saying the building was worth about $2,260,000 repaired, which is in very close proximity to where we ended up at in our value. So I'm not going to present that information as it's after the fact, but just a point of information for the board, but I leave it in your hands.
Okay. Tricia, any questions
No.
of Helen, the assessor?
Oh.
Sorry.
Just to clarify, the only point that you're contesting, you want the 7% expense as opposed to the 2%. Is that the only difference?
Your rent is the same, right?
The rent is the same now. So, and the vacancy is the same, and the, everything else is the same, except for that.
Everything else is the same,
Yeah,
other than
so it's
the
really,
5.
we're just talking about the 5% actually.
Essentially, and the city obviously made an adjustment on the
Yeah.
size, which is the main point.
Okay, so,
I had the same question, so I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Requirement for summary, no, everybody good? Thank you. That concludes 1575. C11, right, yeah, okay. Now, one left, 1555 Dublin Avenue. And we're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment appeal only, no other issues. When you are ready, Ms. Caldwell.
File number 19-568, roll number 13001290100. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $2,227,000. This was built in 1989, 22-foot wall heights. It's zoned M3 and has a land plan area of 2.73. On page 2, you'll see about 7 subject leases in place. There have been no sales. On page 3, you can see some exterior photographs of the property. And then on page 4, an overview of the property. Turning to page 6 for the income workup. We have a total leasable area of 24,684 square feet with an overall rent of $6.39, 4% vacancy, 2% expenses, $3.75 shortfall, 6.5% cap rate, bringing us to our value of $2,227,000. I then have some rent comparables on page 7. All comparables are in the subject neighborhood with similar wall heights. Nothing, I believe, is newer than the subject. Rents range from $6 to $7.50. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my vote.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions?
Just very quickly, looking at that page 7, so the Prudential Business Park would be 117 King Edward, so the first one, and then 550 Century Street as well, is that correct? Prudential Business Park, is that, so as you head north on Route 90 from Portage Avenue, and it splits into Century and King Edward, it's the park right in the middle,
Yeah.
formerly Labatt's multi-building. That's that site?
Yes.
Okay. So that would have higher visibility than the subject, significant loading at the back, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. The Empress and well, actually, I think you have so the Empress and Sanford property, 1125 Empress and 1170 Sanford, the third last and the last comps there. So that building, or it's a 2-building site actually that we represent, so they have a range of between $5 and $7.25 a square foot for that property, correct?
Mhm.
For the in-place leases?
Yes.
Okay. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you. Cynthia, any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Ray?
No questions.
Okay, page 6, Michelle.
Yes.
I'm getting average or blended rent at $6.39 a square foot.
Yes, that's
All right, thank you. That's my only question. Okay, Mr. Smith, when you're ready.
Okay, so just in looking at the assessment, the rents assigned by the assessment department versus the in-places. So the in-place rates come in somewhat lower. The overall average is $6.05 a square foot based on the in-place rents. So it's a matter, are those rents in place, and are they appropriate, are they at market? So again, you have the issue of a multi-tenant building, so you are going to have rents that have a variety of start dates. Some of them will have steps in them, some of them will not, etc. So again, the rents that are in place are what the building is achieving, and it is a normal situation when one's acquiring a multi-tenant building like this, that you won't have all brand new rents as of the valuation date at the peak of the market. So just running through quickly, building property, it's 1555 Dublin, built in 89. Low land to plan area ratio. They have parking at the front of the site with loading at the rear, and it's essentially small. You can get you can get a large truck in, but it's certainly not easy. The access to the back is not ideal, and typically it's meant for smaller trucks, smaller bays, etc. The subject property was appealed in the last 2 cycles, as you can see on page number 1, giving you the 2016 and 2017 outcomes. 2018 was reduced to $1,736,000. We have a market value of $1,993,000 for this cycle based on our analysis. The city's increase is 28.3%, nearly $500,000, which just seems above market for what we see on the market. 6 units in place. They vary in terms of finishing. They're fairly straightforward. Drywall, drop T-bar ceilings, loading at the back, some minor service area at the front. Let's look at the photos. You can see the side yard access to the back on the one side, which is gravel surfaced. Got your parking area out front, and the rear loading area at the back, which is somewhat condensed given the low land to plan area ratio. So then we have some interiors, 1 tenant's front office area. We move into the rear of their units. Relatively straightforward. Then another tenant, you can see the difference in terms of build out, folder tile, etc., lunchroom. Moving on to page 8, again, older finishes in the front area. Tile on the older carpeting, and then we have what that particular tenant is, Fastenal, I believe it is, on page 9. So you have an area up front where they have their product with the durable flooring and T-bar ceiling, etc. Pretty straightforward property overall. Site is shown on page 11. Obviously, as I said, you can get the larger trucks in the back, but it's not a straightforward proposition, so it does have an impact on the desirability of these units, which drives rent, obviously. So looking at the in-place rents on page 15, we have a range of $5 on the low side for the largest unit at 8,176 square feet, up to $7 a square foot on the high end for one of the smaller units, which has more improvements in it. The overall average is $6.05 for the subject. So is that at market? Fortunately, there's a lot of properties in this size range in similar areas. So we're at 1555 Dublin. We have a number of properties right on Dublin here. 1693 Dublin, $6.50 a square foot at 2018 lease for 3 years. We then have 1481 Dublin, 2,500 square foot lease for $5 a square foot in 2016. Very similar properties on Eagle, 17-foot wall height, 595, 525 for recent rents. Keith Road, again, very similar multi-tenant property, $6.50 a square foot. Similar size in a nicer property in St. Boniface, $5.50 a square foot. Cree Crescent, again, another multi-tenant property at 6.25. So your overall rates here do appear to be in line with the market. Again, the larger tenancy here is, forgetting which particular one it is. Our larger tenants here is Lennox, which has been there for some time. And they have had a renewal over that time frame, but they're in over 8,000 square feet, so that is going to drive a lower rental rate as well. So the 605 is not out of range of the marketplace. It's fairly typical, I think. So ascribing more rent to it is probably not fair when determining market value. looking at the remainder of our parameters, again, we are in keeping with the city and all the rest of them, with the exception of the expense allowance, where we are at 7 and the city is at 2. Given the size of the property and the multi-tenant nature, we are in agreement with the cap rate at 6.5% for this one. And this gives us our final market value of $1,993,000, which is a $260,000 increase roughly over the 2018 assessment.
Thank you, Trevor. Tricia, any questions of the accountant?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Ray, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Cynthia?
No, no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions either. Okay, any requirement for summary on either party?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that I believe concludes our hearing today. Thank you both for appearing. And for the pleasant hearing.